Why are we so paralyzed when it comes to doing anything about gun violence, specifically mass shootings? According to a new Quinnipiac poll, almost 70% of those asked want assault weapons banned. 70% want stricter gun laws in general. In contrast, 51% of those asked believe the NRA's policies are bad for the U.S. Only 38% say NRA policies are good for the U.S. So why no action? Check this out. The NRA contributed to 307 of the 535 current members of the U.S. Congress. 8 received over $1 million, including Florida's Marco Rubio. 39 received more than $100,000. And joining us for more is Attorney Jeff Young, known locally as the gun lawyer, Susan Nylon of the ACLU. And joining us by Skype is former Florida Congressman Patrick Murphy. But Jeff, I'm going to start with you. That Quinnipiac poll just came out. And it seems overwhelming. If almost 70% of Americans want assault weapons banned, and that's a non-starter in Congress, let's say, is the Congress, perhaps because of the NRA issue backing, not doing what the vast majority of Americans want?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's because of the NRA backing. I think a lot of them actually do support the Second Amendment and don't feel that banning assault rifles is constitutional or would be an infringement on people's rights.
Let me stop you at constitutional.
Okay.
Because obviously in 2008, 2009, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed the right of Americans to, individuals' right to bear arms. But Antonin Scalia also made a point of saying it does not mean you cannot restrict or regulate whatsoever any guns, including, weapons that, are military-style weapons.
Well, I don't necessarily believe everything that Anthony Scalia says. Just because he's a good conservative justice doesn't mean I agree with him. I think a lot of people disagree with that and feel that the Constitution says shall not be infringed, which by definition means any infringement because it says shall not. However, the issue is, if they don't believe that it's constitutional, or if they don't believe that it should pass because it is an infringement on people's rights, they're not going to vote for it, whether they think it's because of the NRA or it's their own personal feelings. So I understand that people can argue about constitutional, whether you can ban it or not ban it. I think it's a non-starter because I think a lot of these politicians do not believe that you should punish law-abiding gun owners who have done nothing wrong because of what the actions of some non-law-abiding gun owners are done, and they just fundamentally think that that's wrong and they don't want to do it.
Okay, of course, all of this boiled to the surface right after Parkland, and also after a town meeting that was on CNN, which Marco Rubio went to, where he was confronted by one of the students at Parkland. Let's just take a quick look.
In the name of 17 people, you cannot ask the NRA to keep their money out of your campaign?
I think in the name of 17 people, I can pledge to you that I will support any law that will prevent a killer like this.
No, but I'm talking
getting
NRA money.
No.
Patrick Murphy, you were at the end of the NRA spending campaign when you ran against Marco Rubio for the U.S. Senate in 2016. When you look back at that town hall meeting and where Senator Rubio is or was then, what's your reaction?
Well, there's no doubt that the money is impacting votes. So I first want to push back a little bit on what Jeff just said there. To think that $5 million spent on behalf of Marco Rubio to defeat me in the Senate race didn't impact, and still to this day doesn't continue to impact his position is ludicrous. Right? It's a whole different topic about the money and its impact in politics, but there's a direct correlation between the money the NRA spends and where people are at. It was nice that Senator Rubio showed up. That's his job. It's a town hall. He should do that. So I'm not going to give him too much credit for doing that. It was nice to see him move a little bit on some of these issues. However, he said he got back into the U.S. Senate race a year and a half ago after that Pulse nightclub shooting because he was so emotionally torn after that shooting. Yet not a single action was taken by him or his staff to do anything to prevent these tragedies from occurring. So, look, we've got to follow the money here. We need action. With all due respect to Jeff, to put the gun owners of a few people, and I have many friends that have these assault weapons, over the lives and safety of U.S. citizens and children that are being massacred to me is ludicrous. This is a problem that we can solve. We cannot continue to put the NRA and these mass weapon, manufacturers in front of the lives of Americans.
Susan, when we're talking about the NRA and money, you are with the ACLU, you're also a law student, and the Supreme Court has ruled that money is free speech.
Okay, yeah, but that doesn't mean that every elected official has to take that money or has to abide by what that outside interest has. I don't understand what the automatic correlation. Everybody has a right to speak, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to get the exact same reception. And I want to go back to what Jeff said. You can regulate something. The government has the ability to do so as long as it's a legitimate government interest. And regulating guns has nothing to do with taking away the Second Amendment right. We at the ACLU appreciate the Second Amendment, but we also do it within reason and say that the government is within their right to regulate who should have it, who shouldn't, who deserves it, who doesn't.
All right, we are just getting warmed up. We'll have much more on the NRA and money right after we check the first alert weather, so stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the NRA and money, and joining us for more is Attorney Jeff Young, known locally as the gun lawyer, Susan Nylon of the ACLU, and joining us by Skype is former Florida Congressman Patrick Murphy. Patrick, I don't know if you saw it today, but the president met with both Republicans and Democrats. It was an extraordinary session with basically both sides telling him what they think in terms of whether on law enforcement issues, education issues, but also raising the issue of doing away with assault weapons. In the final analysis, do you predict that Congress will do anything?
First, let me give credit where credit's due. I applaud the president for talking about a comprehensive approach to this problem, talking about raising the age, talking about mental health checks, putting few things into a bill and pushing back, saying he's not scared of the NRA. Hey, the words matter. We got to follow this up with action. That's where Congress comes in. I am not overly hopeful that they will do anything. Based on Senator Rubio's town hall, at the comments at the town hall, and based on what we've seen just here in Florida in our legislature, I'm not seeing a lot of courage by the Republicans in Congress or in Tallahassee to do anything. If we see something, I imagine it'll be a very small sort of incremental change around mental health, maybe school safety. At the end of the day, something is better than nothing, but I believe now is the moment where we need big changes. And if people don't get that, they are going to act. These students that we see right now that are energizing so many people across America are not going to stop.
Jeff, at that town hall meeting that Senator Rubio was at and in other venues, the issue has been raised, as we were talking about, in terms of the impact of the NRA has on our legislators, not only just in terms of the money that they contribute, but the rating system. Are those, in your question, fair things for voters to take in mind if their candidate is taking money from the NRA and whether or not they are rated A or C or whatever?
Well, look, I think the ratings are important because what you find is gun owners in general tend to be single-issue voters. It's the most important thing on their mind when they go to the voting booth. So if the NRA gives somebody an A+ rating, that is more important to them than how much money they donated to them or not. I mean, the NRA is a political action committee, a lobbying group, just like any other. So why shouldn't they be allowed to donate money to candidates to get them candidates that they think are going to vote in favor of them? I mean, Planned Parenthood does it, unions do it, everybody does it. The NRA doesn't even crack the top 50 in most donations and the top 500 in other types of donations. So they don't contribute as much money as people think that they do, but they are an advocacy group. They represent millions of Americans, so that's a powerful place to be.
Right. They represent, I believe there are something like 5 million members of the NRA, and as Senator Rubio said, they have a voice and they are entitled to say exactly what they mean to say. Last week, there was the CPAC convention in Washington, D.C., and the NRA's national spokesperson took to the stage and said this.
Many in legacy media love mass shootings. You guys love it. Now, I'm not saying that you love the tragedy, but I am saying that you love the ratings. Crying white mothers are ratings gold to you and many in the legacy media in the back.
How do millions of Americans who don't agree with that believe anything the NRA says when the national spokesman for the NRA basically vomits on national television. And that's exactly what that was.
Well, look, I don't represent the NRA. I'm not here to approve of everything that they say or everything that they do. I think there probably is somewhat of a truth, not necessarily that they enjoy those things, but certainly the ratings and stuff go up.
No, but
okay.
hold on one second. I don't know an anchor, reporter, producer at any news organization or anywhere that enjoys mass shootings.
Okay. Well, I don't know any law-abiding gun owner that enjoys mass shootings, but that doesn't stop people from telling us, as Mr. Murphy just did, that I care about my guns more than I care about children. It doesn't stop them from telling the NRA that they have blood on their hands. It doesn't stop them from yelling at Dana LaRoche at that CNN town hall meeting, calling her a murderer and saying they should burn her on her way out the door. So the rhetoric on both sides is ridiculous when it comes to this issue. I agree with that. I wouldn't have said what she just said, but to claim that there aren't people out there that probably enjoy the sensationalism of it just is ridiculous. Just to claim that there are gun owners out there who enjoy children being slaughtered because they don't want to give up their guns. People should stop saying that on every side.
Susan, is that the problem here, is that the rhetoric on both sides have gotten so overheated that we can't listen to what each other are saying?
I don't think it's significant to this time period or this topic. I mean, the rhetoric in general is just out of hand on almost every topic. But you can look through our history and say we've always had a difficult time communicating. It just so happens that this topic is incredibly passionate. It hits a lot of people, and it's incredibly concerning, and it doesn't go away. I don't think it matters. For Jeff to say he's not here representing the NRA, every time that somebody gives money, their annual dues to the NRA, they're representing them. They're telling them exactly what it is that they want them to do. Every time a politician sits down with a lobbyist from the NRA and gives them the opportunity to talk and help influence the law, it's in support of it. Is it out of touch with what the majority of people want? I would say so, but
You know, we did want to ask a number of local legislators in terms of whether they will continue to take NRA money, especially after the Parkland shooting. Let's show a little graphic here. Greg Stubbe, who is now running for Congress, said, "I would take money from any organization that supports the Second Amendment and our right to keep and bear arms." Joe Gruters, who is a state representative, says, "I would take money from anyone who thought I was worthy of representing our area, and that would include the pro-Second Amendment and gun advocates." We asked Julio Gonzalez, who is looking to possibly running for Congress to replace Tom Rooney, but we did not get any response. Vern Buchanan, also no response from him. Patrick Murphy, what's your reaction to that?
Of course, they're going to continue to take money from the NRA, and the only thing that's going to change or could change this debate is if people start showing up to vote. If people show up to vote and we are activating a new group of people like we're seeing right now, things will change quickly because politicians will lose their job. But right now, you see a certain amount of complacency. And in the earlier segment, it was discussed that the NRA isn't just money, it's votes. You look at the NRA membership, and their voting percentage is much higher than everyday Americans. So politicians know that, and they're going to recognize and see who's going to show up to support them. So it's going to take an election cycle or two. And beyond just that NRA movement, this gun debate, we should be looking at how do you broaden the voting base? Such things as primaries that are so dictated by these gerrymandered districts. Let's have a discussion about opening up the primaries to allow independents to vote. 1/3 of Floridians basically can't even vote in primaries. Let's give them a voice too, and you'll see this conversation change real quick.
You know, Jeff, we saw some interesting things in the recent special election for House 72, where there was a significant number of Republican women who crossed over and didn't vote for the Republican candidate and voted for the Democrat. Would you be concerned that there is that kind of crossover these days, and that the NRA and supporters of the Second Amendment have to be at least aware of what seems to be shifting public sentiment on some of these issues?
Well, I think, you look at all these special elections, they're all different. And is there a switchover? Yeah, I mean, there could be a blue wave coming. It happens every time there's one of these cycles. But I think the issue with the NRA is they are a lobbying group that lobbies for a specific point of view, which is a pro-Second Amendment point of view, and their members lobby that way as well. And their members may only be 5 million, but there are millions of other gun owners out there that support the NRA. They just don't pay the dues every year to be counted as one of the 5 million people. And as Patrick said, those people vote. They come out in droves, and they are generally single-issue voters. So I think if you have a Republican that's going to go soft on guns, I think they're in more jeopardy of losing their seat than a Republican who just goes soft on things to try and get women voters or whatever to cross over. I think it happens all the time.
You know, there's a fascinating article in New Yorker magazine about the NRA's influence on Florida politics, and they point out Ray Pilon, the former state representative who is now running again for his old seat. He crossed Marion Hammer, the lobbyist for the NRA in Tallahassee, over his version of an amendment. And his rating went from A to C at the time he was running against Greg Steube for the state Senate, and he believes that may have sunk his campaign.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, there were 5 legitimate Republican candidates running for the same seat that all had a lot to contribute. So I don't think the NRA rating was enough. I do agree with Jeff, though. The NRA rating is incredibly important to gun owners. What I object to is the idea that regulating a gun is an infringement upon the Second Amendment. I think we need to get away from that. We've regulated guns before. We regulate almost everything that we do in the United States, whether it's drinking, whether it's marijuana, whether it's driving, and so forth and so on. And just because you want better gun laws doesn't mean that you don't support the Second Amendment.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, and we'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. Stay with us. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Patrick, I'm going to ask you a specific question responding to something that Jeff said, that pro-Second Amendment voters are really dedicated. In many cases, they are single-issue voters. And the slice of people who may not agree with that, even if they're Republican, moderate, or liberal, or whatever, that will vote on this one issue is just not the same. So is that an obstacle that, in your opinion, people who want to do something in terms of the gun issue itself has to overcome?
No doubt about that. That's true. And Democrats have those single issue voters on issues as well, whether that's unions or choice and marriage equality, et cetera. So both sides have these issues, which you could say is one of the factors leading to the breakdown in our democracy.
Jeff, in terms of wrapping this up, and in terms of putting into context the questions about rating, NRA ratings to candidates, and also the money received, you know, what do you want folks to know?
Look, I think the issue is that the NRA has become an easy scapegoat villain when things happen. The NRA represents millions of law-abiding citizens, okay? We're not felons, we're not out there misusing our guns, we are everyday average Americans, and we belong to the NRA because they support what we support. And trashing them and saying they care more about their guns than they do children, or saying they have blood on their hands, it's not going to bring us to the table to have any sort of conversation to get anything done.
But Susan, let me ask you this. I saw Bill Galvano on TV the other day talking about the desire to approach this problem in a holistic sort of way. Holistic means whole. And if you're not talking about one part of the equation, which is the availability of these weapons, then what do you mean by holistic?
Well, I don't know what he means by holistic, but I do have a sense that it's a multi-level solution to this problem. Putting guns in schools with teachers is not going to solve anything. In fact, it's going to create a worse situation than it is. But if you recognize that the teachers do have problems in how they handle situations like this, we need to support them. We need to understand, too, that you're right, Jeff. I have plenty of family members who are law-abiding citizens who love their guns as well. However, they do not oppose to regulation because they don't feel that everybody should have it. We need to look at the whole picture, absolutely, but we got to start somewhere, and why not regulate them?
Okay, I want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Attorney Jeff Young, known locally as the gun lawyer, Susan Nylon of the ACLU, and joining us by Skype, former Florida Congressman Patrick Murphy.